Bob Wall, an Okinawa Tay stylist, trained under me. Good sidekick, very aggressive, always likes to get off first. Pat Burleson, Texas fighter, Korean stylist. He is our grandfather of point fighting karate. Vicious, gets wild, hits you with the hands or gets you underneath with the kicks. Skipper Mullins, Texas fighter. Excellent kicks, real good speed, especially in his right leg. Again, he gets you that right side kick, right round kick, or come over the top with a right chop. Won a lot of tournaments in his lifetime. One of the all-time greats.
Striking in, face any area that's delivered to a vital area. Bottom fist, Tei-Sui techniques. Backhand, Urakin, back knuckles, open hand techniques. Shotai to the face. Shuto, any other part of the body. Techniques with the feet will count. Ball of the foot, striking to the body area or to the face area. If actually striking to the face area, please do not use the ball of the foot, but use the top of the foot. Just enough for the referee to hear it without injuring your man. On heel techniques, in the body area, you can bring those in with a little bit of force, and try not to do injury, try not to break anything.
Welcome everybody to the Jim Harrison Tribute. We are so happy to be here. We're being honored by so many of the best martial arts in history, the foundation of really where it all began, the true backbone of everything. Please help me welcome Steve Selby.
About 3 weeks ago, I started talking with Bob Wall about doing an event, a tribute to Jim Harrison, and working back and forth every day, trying to get a hold of as many people as we could. We really appreciate you guys showing up. Mr. Harrison, originally from Kansas City, lives in Missoula, Montana right now, and he told me, this was about a month ago, he said, you know, I fought all over the world, and of all the championships that he's won, all the places, everything that he's done, he said, back in those days, when you went to fight, you knew anywhere in the world you went to fight. He said, but when you came to Texas, you went to war. And the first thing he said, the first thing I noticed when I came to Texas and fought was, number one, the amazing skill of all the fighters down here. And he said, number two, is he said, I realized that even after we killed each other and beat each other up, afterwards, they were such gentlemen. And he said he'd never seen a combination of guys that were just unbelievably tough, unbelievably skilled, but loved each other so much and really treated him so well. And I think it's appropriate that we have this tribute down here in Texas. We wanted to do it Texas style. So we appreciate you guys coming. We've got people from all over the country. I can't even begin to name all the people that are up here. We've got a video presentation that Mr. Bob Wall is going to present. Then we'll have some people up here on the stage. We'll have a time where you guys can ask them some questions.
You know, the thing I love about martial arts, the one thing that separates us from the other martial arts, wrestling, boxing, savate, whatever you want to call it, it's respect. I was a brown belt the first time I saw Jim Harrison and Pat Burleson, and I thought, I want to be just like them. Those are BMs, you know what. And then I find out what a great man he is, what a great human being, and I thought, you know what, Jim has put a lot of his body into this, and so we could help him put some of that body back together with a little tribute. We were talking about where, and he said, has to be Kansas, where he's from, or Texas. And I said, well, you beat up so many people, and you've been beat up by so many people in Texas. What a better place. And he said, yeah, those Texans can fight. So we're here. Anyway, thank you. Without further ado, Jim Hartley. He's my chairman from Kansas. He brought the Kansas guys. And let me tell you, there's a lot of blood in his saddle, his and his wife's, along with Steve Selby and Elizabeth.
Our heart about this, and I'm with Champions of Life, our nonprofit youth ministry or youth center we do, but you know, when he called me, first we started with the movie idea, then we just kept expanding, then Steve got in, and Steve's like, this is Texas, we go big or you go back to Kansas, Toto. All through this I'm saying, you know, Bob, I think there's something bigger this is about. And it's kind of coincidence, same time UFC is here, and we're a lot of us fans and training, but it's kind of like the old wineskin, new wineskin is, it's about the Kota Bushido. Because I've trained jiu-jitsu guys come in their black belts, and I say, well, we don't do that. That's not the Kota Bushido. They're like, what's that? I said, well, Are you martial artists? We want to keep the art in the martial arts. And these are the guys who are founding fathers of American martial arts. And they are the Kota Bushido. They're living Kota Bushido, and that's, living legends and life and legacy. And we don't want to just honor them. We want to make sure their legacy continues. So here's a project that Bob got inspired, and I said, we need to have the Kota Bushido in the programs and have it out there. And he came up with his, and he said, well, that's not good enough. Because I told him, he says, I want everybody to write their own personal, every black belt write a personal Kota Bushido. We're going to start out with a little tribute to Bob Wall.
The life and legend of Bob Wall. Grandmaster Bob Wall took first or second in every major karate championship from 1965 to 1972. The legendary quintet of Chuck Norris, Mike Stone, Joe Louis, Skipper Mullins, and Bob Wall sweep the world professional titles from 1970 to 1972. Grandmaster Bob Wall was fortunate enough to have worked on 3 of Bruce Lee's movies. Everybody knows about Bruce Lee's brilliance with martial arts, but Bob says if you took away his martial arts, he'd still be a fun guy to hang out with. In the last 3 years of Bruce's life, Bob got Bruce started on motivational tapes and books, and Bruce shared his ideas on Eastern philosophy and would constantly challenge Bob's thinking on martial arts. Grandmaster Wall has been featured on the cover of an amazing 64 magazines. Bob starred with his wife Lillian in Lawman Jeans commercials. One of Grandmaster Wall's best business partners and friends is none other than Chuck Norris. Wall and Norris have been friends since meeting in tournaments in the 60s. They created tournaments, starred in movies. Name it, and these two men have accomplished it. In January 2000, Bob Wall became the founding member and president CEO of World Black Belt Inc., and after 9/11, started the America in Defense program.
We have created America in Defense. People around the world, they're not going to sit on a plane and allow terrorists to take it over, so they're going to get help as well. But the important thing is, whether you win or lose, that you're trying.
As a leader in martial arts, Grandmaster Bob Wall was honored with a celebrity roast. Bob's friends and family proudly recognized his dedication to martial arts and business alike. Grandmaster Wall's endeavors prompted American Airlines to make Bob an honorary captain.
Okay, so tonight you guys have all so far heard about Bob Wall, the martial artist.
Dad, you definitely had some interesting parenting skills. I mean, not that I object, but you had some interesting ones. I think we were in Tahiti. This was when you were 18, I was 15. And we're sitting at the bar in Tahiti, and not that I hadn't had my taste of a liquor at 15, but, I was still at the point where I was like, I probably shouldn't do it in front of my parents. We're on a family vacation, so I'm sitting at the bar just assuming I'm going to have a Coke, and my dad slides me over this pink frosty drink, and he's like, this is a Chi-Chi. I want you to drink this, because you need to know what this is like. This is what I used to buy all the girls that I used to date. Tastes like nothing, but you have 3 or 4 of them, all of a sudden you're flat on your back, your legs in the air, and your panties fall off.
And I want you to know what this feels like, so you know it.
Bob and I became partners in 1967.
Bob loves to share his experience with school owners and beginning martial artists alike. From current endeavors to his encyclopedic knowledge of real estate, a worldwide martial arts community which has the WBB credit card, the Dynamic Flex, the Kick Bar, and Knockout Fitness Recovery Water. With all of Bob Wall's accomplishments, he loves most being home with family and friends for sport competition, good food, and drink.
I'm Steve Mackey, and I'm the 13th black belt that Mr. Harrison ever promoted, and I'm very proud to say that I got my black belt from him. And Jim, you've been more of a father to me than my father. He left when I was like 6 years old, and when I walked into the dojo when I was 21 years old, I was kind of a mixed-up human being, and you really did a lot for me. We had a tradition in our school, if a black belt from another school came in and challenged one of our brown belts in a no holds barred, no gear, no time limit match, and he thought he could beat one of our brown belts, we'd pay him $1,000. Well, while I was a brown belt at that point in time, we had somebody come in, and this guy was a very large human being, had a suit on, looked real sharp, was asking for the contract, wanted to do that deal, and we actually took it serious. I kind of scared Jim, I think, that this guy, we might have to be paying $1,000 out because I was the brown belt, and we called the brown belt the gunner. Well, at that point in time is when I got 2 weeks worth of personal training from Mr. Harrison. Remember those days, Jim? That's when I realized what an amazing fighter and human being he is. He beat me up on a daily basis and taught me how to fight better and really fight a street fight. I was a good tournament fighter at that point in time, but I had no idea how to really survive on the street until those 2 weeks. The Bushidokan system has been, because of the gym, the place to be. And I have a lot of good students who have come up underneath me, and he let me stumble through teaching classes when I started. And that's one of my favorite things to do right now is to teach. It's all because of Jim. I'm just honored to be here, and I love you, Jim.
Greg was famous in the Bushidokan. We did all his commercials, all his natural talent, and he did these flying side kicks, quarter inch from the guy's face, and the announcer beats up 5 guys. The announcer says, "Are you afraid of anyone?" And he says,
"Why should I be?" Hello, Mr. Harrison. And I know that you're all believing or all thinking that, who is this guy? I haven't seen him in a long, long time. I have to establish a little credibility here. I understand that. And so, being known as Jim's greatest kicker ever, along with a few others, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of my kicking prowess. Front kick. Side kick. Back kick. Roundhouse kick.
So you have some special guests for you here today. First, I'd like to introduce the guy who's now right in the middle of what has become the largest sport in the world, mixed martial arts. And you'll see him tonight on the UFC, Mr. Joe Rogan. Hey. Joe Rogan, guys. Okay, and last but certainly not least, another original mixed martial art pioneer, our mystery guest tonight, Mr. Chuck Norris.
All right, as you can see, we've got a relatively impressive dais. Of course, who ever heard of any of these people? But anyway, I want to thank Chuck Norris and Joe Rogan for doing us the honor. And so I know we're going to have a good time. So my daughter, Cara, and Christy will be passing around microphones, asking questions. Ask away.
Hi, my name is Rooster. I want to ask Chuck Norris if karate has always been in his life. It's always been the number one thing in his life.
Yeah, I started training in February of 1960 and turned my life around. You know, I was a real quiet, shy type of a kid. When I got involved in the martial arts, I was sent to, I joined the military right out of high school, and I was sent to Korea, and that's where I got my exposure to the martial arts. And so I started training in what they called Tangsudo then. It's called Taekwondo now. And so I made my black belt in Tang Soo Do, and my brown belt in Judo while I was over there. What turned me around when I came back from Korea, you know, I had all through school, I'd never gotten from a class and given a book report or anything like that. When the teachers say, my real name is Carlos, by the way, and they'd say, would you come up and give a book report? And I'd just go, no. And I'd get just as embarrassed by saying no as I would if I'd gotten up there. But I went through that, and then when I came back from Korea, I was stationed at March Air Force Base in Riverside, California, and you know, in 1962, not many people knew what the martial arts was about, and so I'd be out there doing my kicks and all this stuff here, and they said, and the guys would say, "What are you doing, man?" And so I told them, and they said, "Why don't you teach us that stuff?" So I thought, well, maybe I'll start a club here at the base, and so I sent out flyers out to everyone and I was going to give a demonstration, but I thought, I'm going to have to give a talk if I get in there in front of all those people. And I've never done that. And I'm 22 years old. And so I wrote out about a half-a-page speech. And I memorized that thing for 2 weeks. And I could say it forwards, backwards, inside out. Now, this was 1962, and I can still remember it very vividly. I walk into this gymnasium. There's like 400 people in there. And the microphone's laying on the floor, so I go and I pick up the microphone, and I say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chuck Norris, and I'd like to welcome you here tonight." That's the last thing I remember. Next thing I remember is I'm walking out in the middle of the floor to do my demonstration, and I'm thinking, did I finish my speech, or did I just lay the microphone down? Well, to this day, I still don't know. But it broke that egg of insecurity that I'd carried around for 22 years, and then I just kept forcing myself to do it until I was finally able to pop that egg open. So to say that the martial arts is a big part of my life, it is my life. You know, I wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't been for the martial arts. I would now have made it into the film world. And I wouldn't have the success that I'm very blessed to have to this day.
My name is Bob Thurman. I'm Steve Mackey's first black belt, but I am Harrison black belt by trade. Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
I met Mr. Harrison down on several occasions, and I am glad to say I survived all of them. Name's Ed Daniel.
I trained with Mr. Steen on the Texas Karate Institute. I met Mr. Harrison in 1966, and I hope I get to tell this story later on about him.
I'm Alan Steen, and I'm going to, since I probably won't get a chance to tell these stories, I'm going to tell Jim that illustrates something about his personality. It's at the internationals in the eliminations, and they lines you up and put you in brackets. And as luck would have it, Jim was paired up against Joe Louis. And Joe Louis was giving him a hard time. And Jim said, "You know, Joe, I'm going to put a big bubble right on your forehead." Well, Joe kind of laughed, and sure enough, first clash, bam, right in the head. Yeah. Joe jumps up, runs over, and this girl's sitting there, and she's got a purse, and he said, "Do you have a mirror?" And he starts looking at his forehead, and sure enough, he had a big knot right here. And the second story I want to tell you is about Jim and Ed Daniel. We had a big tournament down in Galveston.
That's my story. You can't tell that story. You can't tell that.
I got to tell this story. they ended up in the finals, and they blasted each other away. They had blood everywhere. And in fact, the headlines in Black Belt magazine was the mats ran red. Well, they both went to emergency. They're both getting sewed up. And I forget who got sewed up first. But Harrison told that doctor, "You better put one less stitch in my head." Than you put in Mr. Daniel.
My name is George Minshew, and and like all of us up here, we've known Jim since he was civilized, and everybody has the stories, and like Skipper was saying, that was his story, and Alan took one of mine. But you saw earlier a video where Jim was fighting this guy, and they had on boxing gloves. The guy's name is Victor Moore. And there's a reason they were fighting, but let's just say that this was a serious blood match. It went 3 rounds. And I don't know if you could tell in that video, but Victor was just beating Jim's face up. Time after time, he split him open. The doctor came over at the end of the second round with a stapler. That's a true story. Stapler, and stapled his eyebrow closed so he could fight. So they went out in the third round. Victor was getting tired enough. Jim started beating him up, and you saw where he beat him down. He didn't want to get up. So I asked him after the match. There was always a party we would go to, and I said, "Jim, why do you let him beat you in the face like that?" Now, I have to clean up the answer a little bit, and you know why. He said, "Well, I let that guy beat me in the face until his arms got tired, then I beat him up." And that was his philosophy. There were matches he didn't get all the points, but he never lost one. To you, Jim.
I'm George Clark from Kansas City. I'm one of Mr. Harrison's Rottweilers. First of all, Texas, you are our extended home and our extended family. I want you to know that, okay? You are from our heart, okay? We knew when we were coming to Texas, we were coming to fight, okay? And we love you, okay? Jim, I love you as a father. You changed my life, you know it. Okay. My name is Ike Slaughter. I live near Jim, within 50 miles of Montana, so you're considered a neighbor when you do that. Jim, thank you for the invitation to come here. The guys that have put this together have done a great job, and it's an honor for me to be on the stage with a group of fighters like this. I've known Jim Harrison since probably back near the middle of the last century. About 1962, I was a 13-year-old that staggered into his dojo in St. Louis, and he took me under his arm, acted as a father to me, and we've had that relationship ever since. Jim, what you've done for me over the years have made me successful in many areas. About 1968, I got drafted. The Army didn't join me, or I didn't join the Army. The Army joined me, but they couldn't get rid of me, so I spent about 30 years there. And what you taught the military benefited from: a fighting spirit, a martial spirit, a Bushido-Kan spirit. And it was not only me that you've touched as military people, but many more that I could name. My oldest son is one. He's in the Ranger Regiment right now serving as a rifleman. And also your 2 sons here, Tor and Ty, both infantrymen in the Montana National Guard. But what you taught many of us has reached out. Jim, you're a great American. You're a national treasure. And good luck to you, and thank you for all your help. I'm Pat Burleson.
longtime friend and comrade and respecter of Jim Harrison. I've got a lot of stories that I have that Jim Harrison and I were involved with, but none of them I can tell you. I did have one, though, and George told it wrong. That was what changed martial arts forever was when Joe Louis and Greg Baines put boxing gloves on and changed bare knuckle karate to kickboxing. And after that match, the whole world was taking a look at the next fight, and the next fight, Jim was on that card. And he was having a grudge match with Vic Moore, as George said. And on the third round, some of the rounds constituted laying Jim out and getting his face stapled up. I was working Jim's corner and coaching him. And on the third round, Jim was so far back, he couldn't even begin to think about winning. And he looked up at me, he's laying on the mat, going into the third round, and he says, "How am I doing?" I says, "Not good, Jim." He said, "What have I got to do to win?" I said, "Well, you can't win on points. You're going to have to knock him out." Okay. So he got back up and with a white belt step across front kick, lunge punch, knocked Victor into the next week. Won the match and established himself as one of the first kickboxing champions of the United States. Jim, here's to you.
My name's Mark Payne. I want to allude to one thing and then I'll get off. Greg Williams, when he told a little story about Bobby Ryan and Jim and the eyeball, it fell on deaf ears, most of you don't know. Make a long story short, this guy here, I've known him for years. I've never seen him raise his voice. I've never seen him point his finger, make a threat. I've seen him talk very lowly, and he's just always keeps his cool. We're at a Wichita tournament. A couple guys are fighting. Pizzari starts trying to intimidate the referee. Jim says something to Pizzari. Pizzari mouths off to Jim, and Jim says, "Well, let's just go outside." Okay? They start to go outside, and Pizzari wisely decides he doesn't really want to go outside with Jim. Well, there was this young kid at the time, I think he was 20, 21 years old. I think he later became a world champion. His name was Bobby Ryan. And Bobby Ryan had more gonads than his instructor. And he didn't have much brains, though. And he comes up to Jim. Jim is keeping his cool, talking very decent to this kid who's obviously way over his head. Way over his head. And his instructor doesn't say nothing. His instructor's just glad that Jim's not focused on him. Well, Bobby Ryan, Jim was cool, but Bobby Ryan made a bad mistake, and he said some choice words to Jim that you would hear in a penitentiary. And the next thing you know, Bobby Ryan starts to take a swing at Jim, and Jim did one of his famous throws. Everybody grabbed Jim. Nobody grabbed Ryan. Jim was on top of Ryan. I can see blood coming out of Jim's cheek, and Bobby Ryan is just gnawing on Jim's cheek. And Jim Harrison says, in a nice, calm voice, "Will you guys let go of me because this blankety blank is biting me?" Right on my knees, I see the whole thing. Jim slipped his thumb into Bobby's eyeball, and he had it in there. And Jim just taught us a couple weeks before how to pop an eyeball out. And he said, "Okay, you son of a gun, I'll trade you some flesh for an eyeball." Immediately, Bobby Ryan let go of Jim. But The whole time this happened, he never raised his voice. He never got upset. And the thing I want to say about this guy is there's a lot of guys that can talk the talk, not a lot that can walk the walk.
Hi, my name is Bob Wall, and I'm Gene Lavell's black belt. I'm Joe Lewis's first black belt, and I'm the phenomenal Chuck Norris's 48th black belt. That's about as proud as you can get. And I only have one quick thing to say about Jim Harrison. A lot of people in this room don't know, but in Jim's private life, he's known as Pastor Harrison. And he's actually, and I'm known as Reverend Robert. Now, not everybody knows that, but we've gone on a few missions together and brought recalcitrant sinners to the Lord. And he's really good at it. And with that, I want to introduce the only man on earth to win a world boxing title and a world kickboxing title, Troy Dosey.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. And Mr. Wall, thank you so much for promoting this event. And if it wasn't for you, I don't think that it would have happened. And Mr. Selby, all the people that did this, thank you so much for your work. And, yeah. I keep hearing these people talking, these great men of martial arts. These are some of the best martial arts in the world. I started to say Texas, then I think the country, no, the world. These great martial artists. So when I sat down up here, or they asked me to sit up here, and I hear people say, they're saying they did this in this year, and this in this year, and this in this year, and in 1962, they did this. That's when I was born. It makes me feel really young, although I'm 51. I'm not really that young. But I never got to train with Mr. Harrison. He's done a couple of seminars at my school, but I've heard about him since I started karate, about him doing this and him doing that, and just doing unbelievable things and being so tough. And I know that we've heard some people talk about what he's teaching about what I think the martial arts is all about. It's about respect. It's about self-control. It's about discipline and the danger of drugs and alcohol and all the things that are attacking our society today. Mr. Harrison implemented into his program, and these people that were his students, and then their students, and then us also, we've learned some great things from Mr. Harrison's lifestyle as far as those kind of things. You can't when you hear Mr. Harrison's name, you never hear anything bad about him unless you were on the other end of one of those kicks or punches or one of those his teeth, I guess. But always hear about respect, and you always hear about just the utmost character. So I'm grateful to be able to be up here and sit with these men and be able to say a little something to you. So I thank the Lord for putting me in karate in 1974. Yeah, I said 74, and they're saying 40 this and 50 this and 60 this. So I feel, it makes me feel a little younger. I'm 51. I'm not very young, but it makes me feel a little bit younger. But anyways, so I'm very thankful for being able to set up here with these people and be able to be at this event. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and supporting one of the greatest legends in martial arts. Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. God bless you.
I've got to say something about Jim. You know, it takes a lot for Gene and I to leave our ranch down in Navasota. But when Bob called me and said that we're going to have a tribute for Jim Harrison, we said, we'll be there. Now, it's raining and thundering out there. We never fly in bad weather. But today we were determined to be here to give a tribute to Jim, and that's why we're here, because we love this guy. You know, amazing Jim. You know, I've known Jim from the early 60s, and I used to watch him fight at all the events that I'd go to and fight in, and he'd be knocking these guys unconscious. I said, man, this guy has no control, you know. Anyway, he comes down to my karate school one day. He says, let's spar. I said, okay. Anyway, we start sparring. And anyway, I come in to do a move on Jim, and Jim throws a punch. Bam, and stops it right there. I said, he does have control. But I met Josh Barnett at the last Pride fight in Vegas before UFC bought them. And I was talking to Josh, and he says, I think you know my instructor. I said, really, who's that? And he says, Jim Harrison. I said, yeah, I know him. He's one of my good friends. And I said, no wonder you're so dadgum tough, you know? And I said, because Jim, you know, Jim's one of the toughest guys I know. But anyway, we're so proud to be here to honor Jim today and just let you know how much we love you, buddy.
Thank you. I really don't know what I ever did to deserve this, and especially deserve all these type of people, such good friends. In 1965, I went to June Reed's tournament in Washington, D.C., and this gentleman here, Pat Burleson, walked up to me and introduced himself, and I watched him fight in the finals that night, and the finals were 3 of my 4 idols were already in the finals, and that was Pat Burleson, Alan Steen, and Mike Stone, and some poor guy named Worley that walked out of the ring kind of looking like he was a mummy, because every one of them dropped him and knocked him out. And I just thought, man, just to be anything near as good as those guys would just be wonderful. And I lost the first round to a guy named Ingalls. I moved in to hit him, and he was a little short, stubby guy, but he had the fastest sidekick I ever ran into, really. I run a lot of you guys' sidekick down here. Incidentally, several years ago, I changed the name of Alan Steen's karate schools. Somebody's got some, it's not Taekwondo, it's Texquando. We even have some posters and patches made up like that. And some of the Texans did that. But anyway, Pat was very gracious, invited me to come to Texas. So to Texas, the first fight that was up was in Oklahoma City in Jack Wong. And I got to fight there. And Alan Steen and I fought. And I stepped in, we bowed in, and I stepped in and I hit Al in the face with a heel kick, and his head kind of flew back a little bit, but you know, he's a Texan, he didn't even feel it. And they called it a point, and he says, you guys are going to call that a point? And the referee come up and started wiping blood off his mouth. And he says, I got to guess that was a point. Then he got set up for that classic, what he calls his sliding sidekick. I was in a left lead, and as he blew in, I was going to switch sides and block that kick and turn and hit him with a spinning back kick. Well, I got about square on as I could bend when that foot hit me in the chest. I didn't touch down for 10 feet, and I slid about 30 feet and banged my head against the bleachers. I sit there and shook my head, and the referee come over and asked me if I'm all right, and says, well, I think so. And Al's standing back in the ring, and he says, hey, Jim, come on, get back in the ring. So we got back in the ring, and we finished the fight, and I got my ass kicked. But just to be with those kind of guys, and when I walked in the door, I saw Skipper Mullins and David Moon kicking the basketball net. They were seeing who could kick the basketball net hard enough to flip it up through the ring and back down. And I thought, where's the trampoline these guys are taking off from? You know? And I just couldn't imagine the difference. We'd been fighting in St. Louis and Chicago and places like that, and a lot of people up there, you either hurt them in the ring or you had to hurt them out of the ring afterwards. And these people would just get out there and just beat the hell out of each other and walk off the floor laughing and bleeding, and just it was just a totally different atmosphere. They were also so respectful and polite and everything like that. It was just I thought I'd just crossed the line into a different dimension. And then I started every chance I could get. I would come to fight in Texas or Oklahoma. We had the same kind of people up in Kansas. Roger Carpenter, and he threw a grid tournament, same kind of fighting. Then there was the boys from Arkansas and the boys from Missouri. And then there were we even had a saying. We didn't have just a penalty point or disqualification in Texas or any part of the Midwest. And I can remember, I think I got the very 2 penalty points ever gave in Texas from Alan Steen. I was fighting David Moon and knocked him out twice, and that was just 2 points. And then the third time, he gave me a penalty point because he didn't want to disqualify me, so that put me back a point. And David, even though I had been knocked out twice, he got up. He had a lot of spirit, a good fighter. He hit me with a side kick in the arm and moved me back out of the ring, and damn near broke my arm. I was glad he didn't hit me in the ribs with that kick. But I would have rather got caught in the ribs and got to get a chance to go ahead and finish off. But I had 2 penalty points against me already, and they gave somebody else was refereeing, but I think Trios was, and they gave David the Moon the win that time. And then that was that before or after we fought, Ed? That was after, wasn't it? Because you told me I had to whip his ass, or I'd have to pay the hospital bill, right? Well, I'm going to give you just a slightly different version than was told about that those stitches. On the way over, we made up we said whoever won the match. Well, first of all, we clashed at the same time. I hit Ed in the right eye, kind of across here and down the cheek. He hit me. This is the second time he knocked me out, and he hit. No, that was when we fought the first time, wasn't it? Anyway, we decided they took us to the hospital, and Ed says to me, he says, "Jim, how are we going to determine the winner of this match?" And I says, "Well, how about the guy with the least stitches?" He says, he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I thought he had going to get more stitches than me. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. So they took him in first because they thought he needed more stitches than me. And they had an Air Force doctor there working over the weekend, a plastic surgeon. He sewed it up. And they come and got me, and they laid me down. The doctor's working on me, and Ed is looking over his shoulder all this time. And the doctor kind of turned around and said to Ed, he's standing like this, he says, "Mr. Daniels, I believe this is about all the stitches I can get in this man." And the first time Billy Wallace come to fight in Texas, he went back, he won, but he went back and Black Belt Magazine talked to him and asked him about what he thought about fighting in Texas. He says, the point in Texas would be first-degree murder in California. And I just want to thank all of these guys here. I fought all over the world, and Texas and the boys around it, and that fought here were the best fighters in the world. They were the most polite, the most respectful. To kick your ass 8 ways to Sunday one day, then wipe it for you, and then put you back up, and you walked out of the ring friends, and you walked back in the ring the next time friends again. Pat was actually my first karate hero, and they became the people I wanted to be, and I never dreamed of becoming one of them. I just wanted to be somewhere in the neighborhood. Pat and Jack Wong used to split doing the All-American Championships. One of them would do it in the spring, another one would do it in the fall. And one won Pat's, won one of Ed's, and one of Pat, 2 of Pat's. And when I won that, Pat presented me with the same belt that those 4 gentlemen wore. It's pretty ragged, but it's been around some of the toughest and the nicest people in the whole world. And I'm donating it to the Museum of Martial Arts that Gary Lee runs. He couldn't make it here today because he had to go fishing, But that's the way he makes his living, is by fishing. He's one of these guys that ends these fishing contests, and they make damn near as much money as a golfer does. You know, fishing's a hell of a lot easier than golfing, I'll bet. But anyway, he can't be here, so Steve, I was instructed to present this belt to you. And there used to be a cowboy song, there goes my prized possession. Well, there goes my prized possession. Or one of them outside of, like I said, my family and people like that. But materialistic wise, I wouldn't trade that belt for a new Jaguar, you know, or something like that. But I will give it to the Museum of Martial Arts. I have some other belts that's been signed by many of these people on the thing, including Bob Wall and Pat Burleson, that for my sons here. And then I've got the belt that the Japanese champion gave me. It goes to one of my other sons, or probably stay with the dojo when I die. And I have a belt from the Korean champion too. And they were pretty tough guys, so I didn't beat them, but I beat their friends. And so they presented their belt that they were wearing to me afterwards, and so they're important to me, but those are nailed up behind my wall. So I just want to say once again, honored, and well, I guess that's about the best thing I can say for it, to be selected to do this, and for all of you people that showed up, and for all of my good friends that showed up, and for all the rest of Texans and some people that couldn't. There used to be another song called "Deep in the Heart of Texas." Well, my heart is deep in the heart of Texas. Thank you.
It's good to be back in Texas, and I moved to the southwest regions of the southwest Missouri Ozark region back around 1956. And back then, it was mighty hard for us young fellas to find martial arts teachers. I was fortunate enough to find a jiu-jitsu instructor, military fella. But back then, even long before the media, and I've been in a lot of magazines and a lot of books and all that, but there wasn't much in the way of media back then. But I had to be here today, even though I'm very reclusive and I very rarely go to any martial art events anymore. I had my day in the sun, so to speak. But back when I was a young fella, starting out, Mr. Jim Harrison he was known throughout that region long before any media. There wasn't much in the way of media back then. There was no John and Mary Townsley, none of that. And I came to honor Mr. Harrison because I was blessed to have teachers like Sensei William J. Dmitrik, Tadashi Yamashita, and I was fortunate enough to have become the senior and elder student of the late, great Professor Ronald Duncan, acknowledged as the father of ninjutsu in the Western world by both the Occident, the Orient, including the government of Japan. Would Mr. Gregory Duncan, my teacher's son, stand up for a moment, please? The son of Ronald Duncan. Had it not been for a man named Jim Harrison, I would have never had the inspiration to make my mark into martial arts. And Mr. Harrison, thank you for that inspiration. Listen. Thank you, sir. And I will turn it over to Jim. Again, I'm glad to be back in Texas.
Rick has done so many things for us. So anyway, I would just present him with one of the T-shirts I had left over, or the Bushido-Kan T-shirts. So.
Thank you. We're privileged to have the great Joe Rogan, the voice of UFC. Thanks for being here and honoring us, Joe.
I just want to say that I've been a lifelong martial artist. Martial arts defined me as a human being. It helped build my character. And if it wasn't for all these people that you see here, these are the real pioneers of American martial arts. And these are the guys. Chuck Norris is the very reason I got into martial arts in the first place. Watching his movies inspired me to take Taekwondo, and that made me the person I am today. And all I want to say is it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
I said one of the reasons that I am here tonight was because of Pat Burleson. It was also because of Bobby Wall. The first time I met him was in California. It was the day after he had knocked me out twice. Then I went to California and got disqualified and fought in Chuck's tournament. Him and Mike Stone used to put on a tournament together. Well, I think this was just your tournament that time. Was it the Four Seasons, the first time in Las Vegas? Okay. I went there. I ended up getting disqualified, and California points. But at any rate, Bob has been a great help and quite an inspiration to me. And I remember the first time I met him. I won't go into the details how we did, but I met him at his dojo. Joe Lewis invited me over to his dojo, and he and Bob were partners, and I worked with him on enrolling students, and worked with Joe Lewis a little bit, just on the deck. And then I went down to talk to Mike Stone, and Mike Stone says, "Hey Jim," says, "Did you meet Joe's new partner, that Bob Wall guy?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He says, "What did you think of him?" I said, "Well, the guy talks a lot." I said, "But I really like him." I says, just real right off the bat. And Mike says, "Somebody hold Bob." He says, "Man, he's a professional mouth, isn't he?" But the thing is, he's a good talker as he is fighter, or good as fighter as he is talker, and that's not too much. And I always tell that Bob Wall can talk you out of your shorts and sell them back to you 15 minutes later. Thank you, Bob, for being in my corner.
There was full contact, there was face contact, there were groin kicks, there were leg kicks, there were throwing techniques, there were knees, elbows, all kinds of things. The only thing we didn't do was fight on the ground, or they didn't do. I wasn't around in that day. They didn't fight on the ground like they do nowadays. But they called it the blood and guts era of martial arts, and these guys literally got out and were able to do it. Back in those days, Texas was a kind of a wild place, and they literally allowed guys to fight really, really intensely. So Texas was a place that attracted people like Chuck Norris to come out here from California, and Bob Wall, and these ultra-tough guys that Bill Wallace that said, "I want to test my skills." And they'd come to Texas, and not only did they test their skills, they kicked some butt here too. But it made martial arts back then what it was to lay the foundation for my generation and the next generations of martial artists. And nowadays, with mixed martial arts, and say what you will about it, but it's the biggest, the fastest growing sport in the world right now. And tonight we have the UFC Championship in Dallas, Texas. Mr. Joe Rogan, you'll see him on TV tonight. Awesome, the voice inside the ring of the octagon. Awesome martial artist himself. He trains. He does kickboxing. He's done Taekwondo, champion in Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu. Trained with the famous Eddie Bravo and many, many other people as well. So it's a real honor to have him here, as well as, obviously, to have Mr. Norris here, sir. And it's a pleasure to see both of you guys. Well, we thank you guys. And most of all, it's an awesome opportunity for me to be around Grandmaster Jim Harrison again, and just to be able to hear the stories, to hear him talk. We were fortunate to have him teach a seminar yesterday. Who went to the seminar? Anybody go to the seminar and see him teach? And we really, really, really appreciate it, sir. It's good to have you here. And all the best.